Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. So I am back with the Warhammer Quest series, and we are going to finish up looking through the White Dwarf issues, and then moving on to probably the Death Blow issues, and then finally for the original Warhammer Quest, we will finish up with a couple episode look at the DIY and fan created stuff that I have. So I know this series has been a long time in the making, but hopefully we can finish it up soon. I'd like to get it done just so I could have completed my first kind of major series. But I also want to, once the series is done on the original Warhammer Quest, to do kind of a follow-up with the newer stuff, with Shadows over Hammerhall and Silver Tower, and then some Blackstone Fortress stuff. So, all right, well, let's get cracking here. We are looking at issue 197. Once again, another nice Gallagher cover. So as you're going to notice, there are fewer and fewer things related to Warhammer Quest as the time went on in these White Dwarf issues. But this issue has one of the better magazine expansions in it. So there's not a lot, so we're just going to kind of skip ahead here. I do want to show this off. This completely awesome John Blanche art. Once again, just showing what a master this guy is at fantasy art. The detail is magnificent. And then really the only Warhammer Quest related thing we have in here is, let's see here, the Lost Kingdoms. So this is the this is the second part of the series on, taking off away from the mainland and traveling by sea and going into foreign lands. Concluding our two-part article on foreign travel, this issue we present rules for a life on the ocean wave. Now your warriors can seek their fortune in distant lands. Of course, they have to survive the perils of the sea first. So this is a nice little expansion, I think. We have some the seaport, some information on the Lost Kingdoms, information on finding and boarding your boat, finding a captain. And then we have, of course, the rules for the ocean travel. So here is a captain's table, and that is a roll on a D6, and that will dictate who your captain is for your journey. And so if you roll a 1, the captain says, "Sorry, mate, the weather has taken a turn for the worse and no more ships will be leaving the port for months. You must leave the settlement and play a normal adventure." Whereas if you roll a 6, you get Lord Admiral Kruger. You have managed to get passage aboard Admiral Kruger's war galleon, the Empire's most famous warship, the KLF-2. Kruger has hired you as mercenaries, paying you 50 gold for each ocean event successfully dealt with, and not an uneventful month. The journey takes D6 months. So I wonder, given the, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I wonder, is given the time that this was out, if the KLF is in reference to the electronic duo, the KLF, Kick Out the Jams, in the UK at the time. I don't know. If anybody has any clues about that KLF, let me know. Maybe it means something in Warhammer lore that I'm not aware of. But we also have a harbor location, and so here you can buy things like you can buy rope, sea rations, silk robes, an oriental sword, bucket and spade, pirate hook, that kind of stuff. Sea-themed items. And then here we have ways to make kind of the Lost Kingdom adventures a little, just stand out a little more from the regular adventures. And finally, the coolest part in here is the ocean events table. So when you are on the sea, you roll a D66 for every month, and you will have different kinds of events, just like the travel events that you have to deal with. and there are a good number of them, not tons, but the nice thing is you'll see in some of the DIY stuff, you'll see that they have greatly, fans over the years have greatly expanded these travel tables. All right, so that was issue 197. Now we're going to go to issue 200, the biggest White Dwarf ever. It is pretty massive. This is a good, well, I can't say this is a great issue for Warhammer Quest stuff, which is what I'm interested in, but it's a good issue nonetheless, and I absolutely love that cover. That White Dwarf looks amazing. I'm not sure who did that. Let's see. Wayne England. So I am not as familiar with Wayne England as I would like to be. If anybody has any suggestions of stuff I should check out, let me know, because if this cover is any indication, he is an artist that I need to become more acquainted with. So you got some cards in here, but all the cards were for just regular Warhammer. Maybe some of that epic large-scale battle. So these cards does make, the cardboard insert does make flipping through this issue a little problematic, but I just did want to highlight, we have this Games Day from the Golden Demon 1996. Just kind of a neat historical look at game conventions back in the day, and some really nice painted, some award-winning paint jobs here. Those orcs look great, super clean. I wish I could get my stuff looking that clean. It's a nice looking witch hunter there, battle wizard. So I just kind of wanted to highlight some of the great paint jobs that were in here, and that's one of the things that I just always loved about White Dwarf. Every month I would just go to the newsstand at B. Dalton Books or Walden Books and thumb through this just to look at the amazing paint jobs back when I couldn't afford any of the games. And then there are a few more missions for Space Hulk in here. Again, I would like to play all of these White Dwarf missions using Space Hulk 4th edition. And they really did a lot for Space Hulk in the White Dwarf issues. There's probably 12 or so missions that they've given away for free. That's pretty cool. And then finally we have Getting a Breath of Fresh Air. So this is probably the most interesting Warhammer Quest expansion that they've done in the White Dwarf issues, because this is all about converting your Warhammer Quest warriors to Warhammer Quest Fantasy Battle, which is just something that I have never really been interested in. I don't necessarily like playing games that need measurement. So even when I play a game like Frostgrave, I will play it on a gridded or hexed map, and instead of inches, just count stuff by hexes or by squares. So that's really it for this issue. And next we are at issue number 201, which I think has one of the least interesting covers that we've looked at so far. I really don't like it when they include this huge free thing on the cover. It just takes up so much real estate on the page and really messes with the art. At least this one, they kind of incorporated the advertisement in with the art, so that's okay. I believe that was a David Gallagher. Yep, that's a Gallagher. And this issue really only has one thing we're going to take a look at. That's a nice little diorama setup there. I like that. That's some fantasy ass art right there for sure. And then let's see here. So here we have the Green and Pestilent Land, a Nurgle themed mini expansion. And I do have a feeling that like the Skaven issue that we looked at, I think last episode, I have a feeling that this was probably planned. They probably had this planned as a boxed expansion. So you would have had an Orc expansion, an Undead expansion, a Skaven expansion, and then a Nurgle expansion. because this is one of the most robust expansions in the magazine. So this says a horrifying disease for which there is no apparent cure threatens to wipe out the entire population of an empire town. A cry for help spurs the warriors to find a way to save the innocents, but the origins of this plague are shrouded in mystery and legend. The warriors must find a way to save the town and perhaps themselves. So this does have, I think this has 3 adventures, but it has some nice charts. It has the Festimus is a Chaos Sorcerer of Nurgle with the profile of a standard Chaos Sorcerer. And then you get some Plague Room for your Final Quest room, your Objective room, who you're going to face. Anything from 6 Plague Bearers of Nurgle, 1d6 Nurglings, and 1d6 Giant Rats. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. Up to 6 Skaven and 12 Giant Rats, which isn't so bad. Although, as you know, getting surrounded by giant rats can be, that could be a one-hit kill. And then you get a nice little table here for some Chaos Sorcery. And that's about it. Let's see, you got a little bit more, but yeah, there's not a lot in that issue. So again, that was issue number 201. And now we're going to go to issue 202. And I have quite a bit of stuff flagged in this one. So let's see, that cover was done by Mark Gibbons. Let's see where my first flag is at. So this was an article called Out of the Darkness, and that was written by Mark Brendan. And this article introduces us to the idea of venturing beyond the confines of those drafty, dark old labyrinths, and it gives your adventures a change of scene. If the notion of taking your party on a jaunt around, say, a castle or a wizard's tower, or maybe even outdoors in the woods appeals to you, then read on and discover how to escape that dungeon. So, like it says, this article is kind of just about taking the Warhammer Quest rule set out of the dungeon and into more open areas like Return to the Lost Kingdoms. Something I'm not quite interested in, though I'm sure some people like to play this way. For me, I just preferred the dungeon crawling aspect. And there's not a lot. There's not like very much in terms of rules here. It's just kind of an article about ideas. I kind of feel like if you're playing outside that you really need more and better terrain than I have room to store. So this was something I just wanted to flag just because of some of the art I thought was really good. And this is an awesome picture of kind of the, I don't know, like the family tree of the Chaos Space Marines. I just think that spread is incredible. It's got all the different chapters and their insignia and just things about them. Really cool. I would love to have this as a poster. I love the cartoony drawing of them. Sometimes the Chaos Space Marines they're so grim dark and they're so serious looking that it's pretty cool to see them drawn in this more cartoony style. Almost looks like something you would see in Gru the Wanderer or something. And then the next thing I have is just a few pages from Mike Mavet, who of course probably one of the greatest miniature painters of all time. Some of his stuff, just an incredible talent, this guy. And then what do we have here? Oh yeah, another, so this was I thought this was pretty cool. So this is a 40K modeling workshop. And just some of these models, some of these dioramas they've built and scenery is quite elaborate and would be pretty fun to play with. I mean, yeah, I would love to play a game of 40K using something like that. That's really cool. Or how about that setup there? So, all right, so that was issue 202. I know we're blazing through these a little faster than usual, but I did just want to make sure we get through all of these issues. And we have this one and then one more. So this is issue 204. Again, another great Gallagher cover. So what do I have flagged in here? Let's see here. Oh, I just like some art there. That is a great picture. And then let's see what's coming up next. We do have a cardboard insert here. So this did have a dungeon room and an event card for the sewer and the fascination of Slaanesh. Soft, seductive voices gently whisper the promises of Slaanesh to the warriors, while Ambrosian scents fill the air, binding them to their surroundings. You got to give it to Games Workshop, man. Their lore, their flavor text is just incredible. Each warrior should immediately roll 1d6. Any warriors who roll higher than their toughness will succumb to the fascination and will become incapable of action, their minds being otherwise occupied. These warriors may do nothing until they are next struck in combat. This is then sufficient to shock them out of their trance. And here we have the tile for the sewer, which I already have like a color copy and mounted on some cardboard. So it's nice to have these pristine pages in there. And let's see, what do we have next? Another John Blanche picture there. And then finally in here we have a short article by Steve Anastasov called Room for Improvement. And this says, making your adventurers more individual has been a common theme throughout many of our Warhammer Quest articles. In previous issues, we've looked at monsters and events, and now we have to go to the dungeon itself. So this is just kind of ways of adding some randomness to the dungeons, so we have a little more room, not just another dungeon. So here we have our rules for our sewer tile, and different ways to use the 6 individual rooms. So the Dungeon Cell and Torture Chamber, Monster's Lair, Circle of Power, Well of Doom, the Stairwell, putting it all together. A little Chaos Sorcerer here to use. Some more magic, some Slaanesh magic. So just a nice little article. It gives you some ideas of how to use your tiles in more thematic and different ways. And then finally, we have issue 208. This issue is pretty cool. It doesn't have a lot, but it has one article that I think is very good. So this was, I believe, the last of the warriors to be released was the Questing Knight, the Bretonnian Knight. So you have a small advertisement for him. And then we have this. So this is kind of a post-mortem article written by Andy Jones 2 years on, where he talks about his history with creating the game and what it means to him and all of the things that have come since its inception. So he starts off saying, well, frankly, I'm shocked. Looking at my diary, I see that we are already rolling into 1997 with a vengeance. Apart from heading towards birthday 34, the 10th Golden Demon Award since I did the first one, the end of the millennium, and so on, it means that Warhammer Quest is now 2 years old. It hardly seems that long since the first copies were rolling off the presses, but spring 1995 it was. That means that people have been playing Warhammer Quest for longer than it took me to write it, which is something of an achievement, as at the time it felt like an eternity. So it's a little bit of a sad article in some ways, because this really did kind of signify the end of Warhammer Quest. It had been probably slowly dying over the last year at Games Workshop without any real big physical expansions. We have the White Dwarf articles, but it was definitely, even I think at this time, taken off the back burner, and Andy Jones had probably moved on. But of course, it was such a passion project and such a really just a groundbreaking game for the hobby that he felt the need and wanted to write his thoughts just on making the game and what it means to him as a game designer. And then we just have, it's a nice retrospective, and we don't get that in games a lot. And I do wish that we had more magazines like White Dwarf for other companies, because it would be interesting to see how other designers would write articles on the games as they come out, create little mini expansions. I mean, imagine if there was a dungeon crawl magazine, and maybe 6 times a year an issue came out, and it would have little mini expansion for games like Dark Light Memento Mori, or Secrets of the Lost Tomb, or Gloom of Kilforth. These games that they don't, there's already a lot of stuff for them, but maybe the companies, the designers, don't have enough money to make something big. But if there was a magazine that we could have the creators write articles on, and have cards inside to make little mini expansions just to keep the games alive and in the zeitgeist for longer, that would be really cool. And it would be different than doing it online, because online you still have to print everything out yourself, and you have to worry about getting the cards the right size, the right thickness, the right finish, or all of that stuff. But if we could have something like White Dwarf for the hobby of dungeon crawling board games, I think that would be really awesome. So I don't know, maybe I should start one. Maybe I should look into let's get Patreon going, right, and get one of those started. But so yeah, so this is a really very good article. I love it. Talks about all the stuff, and then it gives you also a list of all of the articles that we have looked at. I think we've looked at all of them. Might have skipped one or two, but we've at least taken a look at probably, if not all of them, then 90 to 95% of them. So I do highly recommend you reading this article in 208 if you can get your hands on it. And then finally we just have this giant, I believe that is a John Blanche splash page, which I thought was just awesome. So yeah, that concludes the look at the White Dwarf issues. So I know that took me a long time to get through them all. There were a lot. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Next, the next episode will be on the 3 issues of Deathblow that came out. So all right, guys, hope you enjoyed this, and take it easy. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.